The red sun of Kepler 442b was setting behind the mining towers when the first explosion shook New Busan colony. 8-year-old Jiho was playing with his wooden spaceship in the small garden behind his family's living unit when the ground beneath his feet began to tremble. "Jiho, get inside now," his father Hyunwoo shouted from the doorway. The tall mining engineer's face was tight with worry as he scanned the darkening sky. Strange lights were moving between the clouds, too fast and too bright to be their transport ships. Jiho grabbed his toy and ran toward the house. But before he could reach the door, a deafening roar split the air above them. A massive black ship descended from the clouds like a giant metal bird. Its hull was smooth and dark as midnight with no visible windows or markings. The ship hovered over the colony's central plaza, casting a shadow that seemed to swallow the light. "Papa, what is that?" Jiho whispered, pressing himself against his father's leg. Hyunwoo picked up his son and carried him inside, where Jiho's mother Minji was frantically packing a bag with food and medicine. Her hand shook as she stuffed supplies into the container. "We need to get to the emergency bunker," she said. "The alarm system is down, but this looks like a raid." Through their window, they could see more ships landing around the colony. These vessels were smaller but just as dark and silent. Strange figures began pouring out of them, moving with quick predatory steps across the settlement grounds. The aliens were tall and thin, with gray skin that looked like old leather. Their heads were larger than humans, with yellow eyes that glowed in the dim light. They wore dark armor that seemed to absorb the light around them, making them look like living shadows. "Vorthak." Hyunwoo whispered the word like a curse. "I heard about them from the Outer Rim traders. They take people. The family tried to reach the bunker, but the aliens moved too fast. Within minutes, they had surrounded every building in the colony." Jiho watched through a crack in their door as the creatures used strange weapons that fired blue beams of light. Anyone hit by the beams fell to the ground, not dead but unable to move. "We have to surrender," Minji said softly. "If we fight, they might kill everyone." Hyunwoo nodded grimly. He knelt down and looked into Jiho's eyes. "Listen to me, son. No matter what happens, remember who you are. Remember that your mama and papa love you. And remember that you are stronger than you think." The door burst open before Jiho could answer. 3 Vorthak soldiers entered their home, their yellow eyes scanning the room like hungry wolves looking at sheep. One of them spoke in a harsh, guttural language that sounded like rocks grinding together. A small device on the alien's belt began speaking in clear human words. "You will come with us. Do not resist or you will be harmed." The family was forced outside with the rest of the colonists. Nearly 800 humans stood in the central plaza, surrounded by Vorthak soldiers. Many people were crying. Children clung to their parents while adults tried to comfort each other. A large Vorthak stepped forward. He was taller than the others, with scars across his face and more elaborate armor. His translator device announced that he was Commander Talon. "Humans," his voice boomed across the plaza. "You are now property of the Vorthak Empire. You will be sorted and assigned to various duties. Those who cooperate will be treated fairly. Those who resist will suffer." The aliens began dividing the humans into groups. Workers went to one side, scientists and doctors to another. Children were separated from their parents, causing screams and tears throughout the crowd. Jiho felt his father's hand squeeze his shoulder as they were pulled apart. His mother reached for him, but a Vorthak soldier blocked her path. "Mama! Papa!" Jiho cried out, but the crowd was too thick and the aliens too strong. He found himself pushed into a small group of other children, all of them scared and crying. Commander Talon walked among the separated groups, studying each one carefully. When he reached the children, his yellow eyes moved from face to face like he was choosing pieces of fruit at a market. Most of the children cowered when he looked at them. They lowered their eyes and tried to hide behind each other. But when Talon's gaze fell on Jiho, the boy did something different. Jiho looked right back at him. The boy was frightened, tears running down his dirty cheeks, but his dark eyes held something the commander had not expected to see. Instead of pure fear, there was defiance. Instead of acceptance, there was anger. The child was small and helpless, but his spirit burned bright. Talon stopped walking. He studied the boy more carefully, noting the way Jiho clutched his wooden spaceship toy, the way he stood straight even though he was trembling. "This one," Talon said in his own language, pointing at Jiho. An older Vorthak approached. This alien wore robes instead of armor, and his movements were slower, more thoughtful. He looked at Jiho with curiosity rather than hunger. Are you certain, Commander? The robed alien asked. The child is very young. Perhaps an older sacrifice would be more appropriate. No, Catal, Talon replied. The Devourer has fed on many species but never human flesh. This ritual will be historic. And look at this one's eyes. He has fire in him. Vex will appreciate the spirit along with the meat. Jiho did not understand their words, but he could sense that something terrible was being decided. He watched as the robed alien called Catal approached him. What is your name, young one? Catal asked through his translator. Jiho, the boy answered, his voice small but steady. Jiho, Catal repeated, seeming to test the sound. You are chosen for a great honor. You will journey with us to our homeworld and participate in a sacred ceremony. I want to stay with my parents, Jiho said. Catal's expression was unreadable. That is not possible. You belong to us now. As the Vorthak prepared to load their captives onto the ships, Jiho caught one last glimpse of his parents. They were being pushed toward a different vessel, one bound for the labor camps. His father was shouting his name, fighting against the guards who held him back. Be strong, Jiho, Hyunwoo called across the plaza. Remember what I taught you. I love you, his mother cried out before disappearing into the crowd of prisoners. Jiho was taken to the largest ship, the one that belonged to Commander Talon. As they lifted him up the ramp, he looked back at the colony that had been his home for his entire short life. The familiar buildings and gardens were already being stripped by Vorthak salvage teams, taking anything of value. The ship's interior was dark and cold, filled with strange smells and sounds. Jiho was placed in a small room with soft walls and comfortable bedding. There was even food waiting for him, better food than the colony usually had. Why are you being nice to me? He asked Catal, who had come to check on him. The alien priest considered the question. Because you are precious cargo, young Jiho. The Devourer must receive his sacrifice in perfect condition. What's a Devourer? Jiho asked, though part of him was afraid to know. Catal's yellow eyes gleamed in the dim light. You will meet him soon enough. For now, rest, eat, grow strong. You will need your strength for what is coming. As the ship rose into the darkness of space, carrying him away from everything he had ever known, Jiho clutched his wooden spaceship and whispered a promise to himself. I will be strong. Papa, I will remember. Outside his small window, the stars stretched into long lines as they jumped into hyperspace, beginning a journey that would take 3 weeks to reach the Vorthak homeworld. 3 weeks for a scared little boy to figure out how to survive something called the Devourer. But Jiho had no way of knowing that his greatest enemy would become his most unlikely friend, and that his simple act of kindness would change the fate of entire worlds. The first week aboard the Vorthak ship was the longest week of Jiho's life. His small room had no windows except for one tiny porthole that showed nothing but the swirling colors of hyperspace. The walls were made of some strange metal that felt warm to touch, and the air smelled like copper and ozone. Every day, alien servants brought him food on silver trays. The meals were better than anything he had eaten on the colony. There were sweet fruits that tasted like honey, meat that was tender and perfectly cooked, and bread that was soft and warm. But no matter how good the food was, Jiho could barely eat. His stomach was tied in knots with worry about his parents. Why are you feeding me so well? He asked one of the servants during his second day. The alien was shorter than the soldiers, with softer features and gentler movements. The servant's translator device crackled to life. Master Catal's orders. The offering must be healthy and strong. What's an offering? Jiho asked, but the servant hurried away without answering. On the third day, Catal himself came to visit. The robed priest moved slowly into the room, his yellow eyes studying Jiho with the same curiosity a scientist might show when looking at an interesting bug. How are you feeling, young one? Catal asked as he sat down on a chair that seemed to grow from the floor. Scared, Jiho answered honestly. And sad. I miss my mama and papa. Catal tilted his large head to one side. Tell me about them. This surprised Jiho. None of the other Vorthak had shown any interest in his feelings or his family. Most of them looked at him like he was just a thing, not a person. My papa works in the mines, Jiho said slowly. He makes sure the machines don't break. And he carves things from wood in his free time. He made me this. Jiho held up his wooden spaceship. Catal examined the toy with interest. Your father made this with his own hands? Yes. He says that when you make something with your hands and give it to someone you love, part of your heart goes with it. So even when we're apart, I still have part of his heart with me." The priest was quiet for a long moment. "And your mother?" "She's a doctor. She helps people when they're hurt or sick. She sings to me at night when I can't sleep. Korean songs that her grandmother taught her." Jiho's voice got smaller. "I wish she was here to sing to me now." Keatle leaned forward. "What are these songs like?" Jiho was confused by the question, but he was also desperately lonely. If this alien wanted to listen to him talk, he would keep talking. They're about home and family and love. And some are about brave people who don't give up even when things are really hard. Jiho looked at Katal. "Would you like to hear one?" The priest nodded. In a soft, shaky voice, Jiho began to sing a lullaby his mother had sung to him thousands of times. The words were in Korean, but the melody was sweet and sad and beautiful. As he sang, tears rolled down his cheeks, but he didn't stop. When the song ended, Katal sat in silence for a long time. "Your species is strange," the priest finally said. "You make beauty even when you are suffering. Don't your people sing?" Jiho asked. "We do not," Katal replied. "We have no need for such things." Over the next few days, Katal visited more often. He asked many questions about human customs, families, and beliefs. Jiho found himself looking forward to these visits. The priest was the only one who treated him like a real person instead of cargo. During one visit, Jiho worked up the courage to ask the question that had been haunting him. "What's going to happen to me when we get to your planet?" Katal was quiet for a moment. "You will participate in a sacred ritual." "What kind of ritual?" "You will meet Vex," Katal said. "The Devourer. He is ancient and powerful, and he has served our people for many centuries." "Is he a Vorthak like you?" "No," Katal shook his head. "He is something much older. We found him long ago on a dead world, sleeping in the ruins of a great city. When we woke him, he was hungry. Very hungry." Jiho felt ice forming in his stomach. "What does he eat?" Katal's yellow eyes looked directly into Jiho's dark ones. "Living things. Sentient beings. Every few years we bring him a sacrifice to keep him satisfied. In return, he serves as our weapon and our guardian." The room seemed to spin around Jiho. "You're going to feed me to a monster?" "It is a great honor," Katal said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Your essence will become part of something greater. Your energy will feed Vex and keep him strong." "I don't want to be eaten," Jiho whispered. "What you want is not important," Katal replied, but he sounded uncomfortable saying it. "Have you ever been eaten?" Jiho asked suddenly. The question seemed to surprise Katal. "Of course not. I am Vorthak." "Then how do you know it's an honor if you've never experienced it yourself?" Katal had no answer for that. As the days passed, their conversations grew longer and more complex. Jiho told Katal about human dreams of exploring the stars, about families who loved each other, about people who helped strangers without expecting anything in return. He talked about his father's belief that every person had value, and his mother's dedication to healing others. In return, Katal began to share information about Vorthak society. They were warriors and raiders who had conquered dozens of worlds. They believed that strength was the only virtue that mattered, and that weaker species existed only to serve the strong. "But if that's true," Jiho said during their second week of travel, "why do you need Vex? If you're so strong, why do you need a monster to protect you?" Again, Katal had no good answer. "Tell me more about Vex," Jiho said. "What does he look like?" Katal described the creature in detail. Vex was massive, like a wolf, but much larger, with 6 legs and crystalline spines along his back. His fur was black as space, and his eyes burned like stars. He had 3 eyes instead of 2, and his teeth were like daggers made of crystal. "He is beautiful in his terror," Katal said. "And terrible in his beauty." "Has he always been alone?" Jiho asked. "What do you mean? You said you found him on a dead world. Was he the only one of his kind there?" Katal paused. "The records are unclear. The planet was lifeless when we arrived. If there were others like him, they were long gone." "That's so sad," Jiho said softly. "He must be very lonely." "Lonely?" Katal repeated the word as if it were foreign. "He is a weapon. Weapons do not get lonely." "Everything gets lonely," Jiho said with the simple wisdom of a child. "Even monsters. Especially monsters." On the final day of their journey, Katal came to Jiho's room one last time before they reached Vorthak Prime. "Tomorrow we arrive at my homeworld," he said. "The ritual will take place the day after that." Jiho nodded. He had been expecting this news, but it still made his heart race with fear. "Are you afraid?" Catal asked. "Yes," Jiho admitted. "But my papa taught me that being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you do what's right even when you are scared." "And what do you think is right?" Jiho thought carefully before answering. "I think it's right to try to understand someone before you judge them. Even if they're different from you. Even if they're scary." Ketal stared at the boy for a long time. "You are not what I expected, young Jiho. What did you expect? Fear, tears, begging for mercy. Would that change anything?" Jiho asked. "No," Ketal admitted. "Then what's the point?" As the ship dropped out of hyperspace near a red planet covered in crystal formations, Jiho pressed his face to the small porthole. Somewhere down there was the creature called Vex, waiting to meet him. "I hope he likes me," Jiho whispered to himself, clutching his wooden spaceship tighter. Ketal heard the words and felt something strange twist in his chest. For the first time in his long life, he began to wonder if what his people were doing was truly right. The ship descended toward Vorthak Prime, carrying a small human boy toward a fate that would change everything. Vorthak Prime was a world that looked like it belonged in nightmares. As their ship descended through the thick red atmosphere, Jiho watched through his small window as strange landscapes rolled beneath them. The entire planet seemed to be made of dark crystal formations that jutted from the ground like giant teeth. A dim red sun hung in the sky, making everything look like it was covered in blood. The cities were built into and around these crystal formations. Tall spires twisted upward, connected by bridges that seemed to float in the air. Lights flickered throughout the structures, but they were cold blue and green colors that made the place feel even more alien and unwelcoming. "It's not like Earth at all," Jiho whispered to himself as he pressed his face against the window. The ship landed at a massive spaceport carved from black stone. As soon as the engines stopped, Ketal appeared at Jiho's door. "It is time," the priest said simply. Jiho picked up his wooden spaceship and followed Ketal through the corridors of the ship. Other Vorthak stepped aside as they passed, all of them staring at the small human boy with curious yellow eyes. Some looked hungry. Others seemed almost afraid. Outside the ship, the air tasted different. It was thinner than on the colony, and it carried strange scents that Jiho couldn't identify. The gravity was lighter, too, making each step feel like he might float away. Commander Talon was waiting with a group of armored soldiers. "The Council of Elders is assembled," he told Ketal. "They are eager to witness this historic ritual." "And Vex?" Ketal asked. "He knows. He has been restless for the past day, as if he can sense what is coming." They loaded Jiho into a transport vehicle that moved without wheels, floating just above the ground. As they traveled through the city streets, Jiho saw thousands of Vorthak going about their daily lives. They all looked the same to him with their gray skin and yellow eyes, but he noticed that they moved differently than humans. Everything they did seemed purposeful and efficient. No one seemed to be laughing or playing or just enjoying themselves. "Don't your people ever have fun?" Jiho asked Ketal. "Fun?" Ketal repeated the word like he was tasting something strange. "You know, games and jokes and dancing. Things that make you happy for no reason." "We find satisfaction in conquest and achievement," Ketal replied. "Frivolous activities serve no purpose. But being happy is a purpose all by itself," Jiho said. The transport stopped at the base of the largest crystal formation in the city. This one was different from the others. Instead of sharp edges, it was smooth and rounded, like a giant egg made of black glass. Strange symbols were carved into its surface, glowing with that same cold blue light. "The sacred cavern," Ketal explained as they got out of the transport. "Home of Vex for the past 4 centuries. They entered through a massive door that opened silently as they approached. Inside, the walls were lined with the same glowing symbols, and the air hummed with an energy that made Jiho's skin tingle. The passages led downward, deeper and deeper into the heart of the formation. With each step, Jiho could feel something waiting ahead of them. Something big and old and powerful. "I can feel him," Jiho said softly. Ketal looked at him in surprise. "You can sense Vex from here?" "It's like a warm feeling in my chest, but also scary, like standing next to a really big fire." "Most beings cannot detect his presence until they see him directly," Ketal said thoughtfully. The passages finally opened into the largest space Jiho had ever seen. The ritual chamber was a vast cavern carved from living rock, so big that the ceiling disappeared into darkness above. The walls were covered in carvings that told the story of every sacrifice that had taken place here over the centuries. Hundreds of Vorthak were already gathered in the chamber, standing in neat rows around the edges. They all wore ceremonial robes instead of their usual armor, and they chanted in low voices that echoed off the walls. But Jiho barely noticed any of this, because his attention was completely captured by the creature that lay in the center of the chamber. Vex was even more magnificent and terrifying than Katal had described. The beast was enormous, easily the size of a small building. His body was built like a wolf, but with 6 powerful legs that ended in claws as long as swords. His fur was so black it seemed to absorb the light around him, making him look like a living shadow. Crystalline spines ran along his back, glowing with inner fire. His head was massive, with a snout full of teeth that looked like they were carved from diamonds. And his eyes. 3 eyes that burned like small suns, filled with an intelligence that was ancient and deep and infinitely dangerous. Those eyes turned toward Jiho as he entered the chamber, and the boy felt the weight of that gaze like a physical force. The chanting stopped. Every Vorthak in the chamber turned to watch as Commander Talon stepped forward and began to speak. "Brothers and sisters," Talon's voice boomed through the cavern. "Today we make history. For the first time we offer Vex a taste of human flesh. This sacrifice will strengthen our bond with the Devourer and bring prosperity to our future raids." The crowd responded with cheers and raised fists. Their yellow eyes gleamed with excitement as they looked between Jiho and the massive creature. "Let the ritual begin," Talon declared. 2 soldiers grabbed Jiho's arms and began walking him toward the center of the chamber. The boy's legs felt weak and his heart was beating so fast he thought it might burst. But as they got closer to Vex, something strange happened. The warm feeling in his chest got stronger. And beneath the fear, he felt something else. Something that reminded him of the stories his mother used to tell him about lonely princes and forgotten dragons. They stopped about 10 feet away from Vex. The creature slowly raised his massive head, and those 3 burning eyes focused completely on the small human boy. The chamber fell silent. Even the soldiers seemed to be holding their breath. Vex began to move. His huge body unfolded as he rose to his feet, towering over Jiho like a living mountain. Each step he took toward the boy shook the ground. The Vorthak crowd leaned forward eagerly. This was the moment they had all come to see. The moment when their sacred guardian would devour the human sacrifice and renew their covenant of power. But as Vex lowered his enormous head toward Jiho, the boy did something that no one expected. Instead of screaming or running or begging for mercy, Jiho looked directly into those blazing eyes and spoke in a clear, steady voice. "Hello," he said in Korean. "I know you're probably hungry, but I bet you're lonely too." Vex stopped moving. His great head tilted slightly, and a sound emerged from his throat that was unlike anything he had ever made before. Not a growl or a roar, but something almost like a question. Jiho slowly reached into his pocket and pulled out his wooden spaceship. He held it up so Vex could see it. "My papa made this for me. He said that when you make something with love and give it to someone, part of your heart goes with it." Jiho's voice was shaking now, but he kept talking. "I don't think anyone's ever given you anything made with love, have they?" The massive creature leaned down until his snout was only inches from Jiho's face. The boy could feel the heat radiating from those crystal teeth, could smell the strange spicy scent of the beast's breath. But instead of terror, Jiho felt something else flowing between them, a connection that went deeper than words or species or the fear that had brought them together. "My name is Jiho," the boy whispered. "What's yours? I know they call you Vex, but that's not really your name, is it?" "That's just what they named you." For the first time in 400 years, Vex made a sound that wasn't a roar or a growl. Deep in his massive chest, a rumble began that sounded almost like purring. The Vorthak in the chamber began to murmur in confusion. This had never happened before. Their sacred guardian was supposed to devour the sacrifice immediately, not interact with it. Commander Talon stepped forward, his face tight with anger and confusion. "What is the meaning of this delay?" he demanded. "The ritual requires consumption. Vex must feed." But when the creature turned one of his burning eyes toward the commander, the look he gave Talon was unmistakably a warning. The message was clear to everyone in the chamber. Anyone who threatened the small human would have to answer to Vex. And for the first time since they had awakened him centuries ago, The devourer was choosing his own path. The ritual chamber erupted into chaos. Hundreds of Vorthak voices rose in confused chatter as they tried to understand what they were seeing. Their sacred guardian, the mighty Vex who had devoured countless sacrifices without hesitation, was protecting a small human child instead of eating him. Commander Talon's face turned dark with anger. "This is impossible," he snarled. "Vex has never refused a sacrifice. Something is wrong." But Katal stepped forward, his eyes wide with wonder rather than anger. "Perhaps nothing is wrong," he said slowly. "Perhaps something is finally right." Talon whirled to face the priest. "What do you mean?" "Look at them," Katal said, pointing toward the center of the chamber. While the Vorthak argued, something extraordinary was happening between Jiho and Vex. The massive creature had settled down onto his belly, bringing his enormous head closer to the boy's level. His 3 burning eyes studied Jiho with an intensity that seemed to pierce right through to his soul. Jiho felt no fear as he looked back into those ancient eyes. Instead, he felt a warmth spreading through his chest, like when his mother hugged him after a bad dream. Without really thinking about it, he reached out his small hand toward Vex's snout. The chamber fell silent as everyone watched the boy's tiny fingers touch the creature's nose. Vex's eyes closed for a moment, and that deep purring sound rumbled through his chest again. "You are lonely," Jiho said softly, speaking to Vex as if they were the only 2 beings in the universe. "I can feel it. You've been alone for such a long time." Vex opened his eyes and made a sound that was almost like a whimper. It was a sound full of pain and longing that had been buried for centuries. "I'm lonely too," Jiho continued. "They took me away from my mama and papa. But maybe we don't have to be lonely anymore. Maybe we can be friends." The boy reached into his pocket and pulled out his wooden spaceship again. He held it up to Vex's massive face. "This is all I have left of my family. My papa made it for me with his own hands. He put love into every piece of wood he carved." Jiho looked into Vex's eyes. "Would you like to hold it? Just for a little while?" Vex lowered his great head even further. One of his claws, each one larger than Jiho's entire hand, extended delicately toward the wooden toy. With impossible gentleness, the massive creature took the spaceship between 2 claw tips and lifted it up to examine it. The sight of the enormous predator carefully studying a child's toy was so strange and beautiful that several Vorthak in the crowd gasped. As Vex held the wooden spaceship, something began to happen in his mind. For the first time in 400 years, memories started to surface. Not the red memories of hunger and hunting and feeding, but older memories, softer memories. He remembered a time before the Vorthak found him, a time when his world was alive and green, filled with beings like himself who communicated through thoughts and emotions rather than words. He remembered having a name that wasn't Vex, a name that meant something beautiful in a language that no longer existed. He remembered having a family. The memories were painful, like probing an old wound, but they were also precious. As Vex held Jiho's toy, he felt something he had thought was dead forever beginning to stir in his heart. "What is happening to him?" Commander Talon demanded, his voice cutting through the spell. But before anyone could answer, something even more impossible occurred. Vex began to speak, not with his voice, which could only roar and growl, but with his mind. And somehow, impossibly, Jiho could hear him. "Little one." Vex's mental voice was like warm honey mixed with distant thunder. "How can you see into my heart when these others have looked at me for centuries and seen only a weapon?" Jiho's eyes went wide with wonder. "I can hear you in my head. How are you doing that?" "My people communicated this way," Vex explained, his thoughts flowing gently into Jiho's mind. "But I had forgotten how. Your kindness has awakened abilities I thought were lost forever." "What were your people like?" Jiho asked, speaking out loud since he didn't know how to think back to Vex. Images began to flow from Vex's mind to Jiho's. The boy saw visions of a beautiful world covered in cities that looked like they were grown rather than built. He saw creatures like Vex, but smaller and more graceful, with fur that shimmered like starlight. He saw families playing together in fields of silver grass under purple skies. They were teachers. Vex's mental voice was full of old sadness. "We traveled between worlds, helping younger species learn to use their minds and hearts together. We believed that intelligence without compassion led only to destruction." "What happened to them?" Jiho asked gently. The images in his mind changed, becoming darker. He saw ships arriving from space, ships that looked like the Vorthak vessels but different, older. He saw weapons that burned everything they touched. He saw his people trying to flee, trying to hide, trying to protect their children. Raiders came, Vex explained. Not Vorthak, but another species that is now extinct. They wanted our psychic abilities for themselves. When we refused to serve them, they destroyed our world. I was away on a teaching mission when it happened. When I returned, everything was ash. Jiho felt tears running down his cheeks as he experienced Vex's memories of loss and despair. He understood now why the creature had seemed so angry and hungry all the time. Vex wasn't just physically alone. He was the last of his entire kind. "I'm so sorry," Jiho whispered. "That's the saddest thing I've ever heard." "I wandered through space for many years after that," Vex continued. "I was mad with grief and rage. I attacked any ship I encountered, feeding on their life energy to sustain myself. Eventually I grew tired and landed on a dead world to sleep. That's where the Vorthak found me centuries later." "And they woke you up and made you into their weapon," Jiho said, understanding. "Yes. I was so lost in my pain that I let them. It was easier to be their monster than to remember what I had lost." Jiho looked around the chamber at all the Vorthak watching them. Commander Talon's face was red with fury, while Katal looked fascinated and confused. The crowd was growing restless, unsure of what to do about this unprecedented situation. "They don't understand what's happening," Jiho said. "No," Vex agreed. "They have never seen me as anything more than a tool for their ambitions. But you, little one, you see me as I truly am." "Because you are more than that," Jiho said firmly. "You're a person just like me. You have feelings and memories and dreams. Just because you're big and scary doesn't mean you're not real inside." Vex carefully handed the wooden spaceship back to Jiho. "Your father was wise to teach you to see with your heart instead of just your eyes. Will you tell me more about your people?" Jiho asked. "I want to know what they were like when they were happy." For the next hour, while the Vorthak argued about what to do, Vex shared memory after memory with Jiho. He showed the boy the beautiful songs his people used to sing with their minds, the way they danced in the air using their psychic powers, the games they played with light and color and thought. Jiho laughed at some of the memories and cried at others. He asked questions about everything, his curiosity as bright and endless as starlight. And for the first time in 400 years, Vex remembered what it felt like to have hope. "Little Jiho," Vex said finally, "you have given me a gift I thought was lost forever. You have reminded me who I used to be. What are you going to do now?" Jiho asked. Vex raised his massive head and looked around the chamber at all the Vorthak who had kept him prisoner for so long. His 3 eyes blazed with new purpose. "Now," Vex said, his mental voice filled with quiet determination, "I remember that my people were teachers, and I think it's time for some lessons." Commander Talon chose that moment to step forward, his patience finally exhausted. "Enough of this madness," he declared. "Guards, remove the child. If Vex will not consume the sacrifice willingly, we will force compliance." But as the soldiers moved toward Jiho, Vex rose to his full height and released a roar that shook the entire chamber. The sound wasn't just noise, it was filled with psychic power that hit every Vorthak like a physical blow. The message was unmistakably clear. Touch the child and die. The soldiers stopped in their tracks, suddenly remembering that they were facing the most powerful creature in their empire, a creature who had just remembered that he was much more than they had ever imagined. The days following the failed ritual were unlike anything in Vorthak history. For the first time since they had awakened Vex centuries ago, their most powerful weapon was no longer under their control. The massive creature remained in the ritual chamber with Jiho, and anyone who tried to separate them faced his wrath. Commander Talon paced back and forth in the council chambers high above the sacred cavern. His yellow eyes burned with frustration as he argued with the other Vorthak leaders. "This is unacceptable," he snarled. "Vex belongs to us. We control him. We command him." Elder Voth, the oldest member of the council, shook his ancient head. "Perhaps we never controlled him at all. Perhaps he simply chose to serve us because he had nothing else." "That's impossible," Talon snapped. "He's a beast, a weapon. Nothing more." But even as he said the words, Talon knew they weren't true anymore. Everyone in the chamber had seen what happened during the ritual. They had all witnessed the intelligence in Vex's eyes, the gentleness in his movements as he interacted with the human child. Meanwhile, in the cavern below, something beautiful was happening. Jiho sat cross-legged on the floor next to Vex's massive head, sharing stories about his life on the colony. He told Vex about his first day of school, about learning to swim in the settlement's small lake, about the time he and his father built a treehouse together. "Your world sounds peaceful," Vex said, his mental voice warm with interest. "My people would have liked your colony." "I wish they could have visited," Jiho replied. "My mama always said that visitors make a place feel more like home." Vex's 3 eyes studied the boy with gentle curiosity. "Tell me more about your parents." Jiho's face lit up as he described Hyunwoo and Minji. He talked about his father's strong hands and patient teaching, about his mother's soft voice and healing touch. As he spoke, Vex could feel the love radiating from the child like warmth from a fire. "They must be very worried about you," Vex observed. Jiho's smile faded. "I hope they're still alive. The Vortex said they were taking them to work camps." "They are alive," Vex said with certainty. "I can sense living beings across great distances. Your parents are on a mining world 3 systems away. Their life force burns bright with love for you." Tears of relief ran down Jiho's cheeks. "Really, you can feel them?" "Yes, little one. And they can feel you too in their hearts. Love creates connections that distance cannot break." As the hours passed, Vex began to share more of his own memories with Jiho. He showed the boy how his people had used their minds to move objects, to heal injuries, to communicate across space itself. "Could you teach me to do those things?" Jiho asked with excitement. "Some of them, perhaps," Vex replied. "Your species has more psychic potential than the Vorthak realize. They see only your physical weakness and miss your mental strength." Vex began to teach Jiho simple exercises. He showed him how to quiet his mind and feel the energy that flowed through all living things. To Vex's amazement, the boy learned quickly. Within a few hours, Jiho could sense the emotions of the Vorthak guards standing outside the chamber. "They're scared," Jiho said with his eyes closed, concentrating on the feelings he was picking up, but also confused. "They don't understand what's happening. Fear makes people do terrible things," Vex explained. "My captors are afraid that if they lose control of me, they will lose their power over others." "Is that why they hurt people? Because they're scared?" Vex considered the question carefully. "Fear is part of it, but there is something else. They have forgotten how to see other beings as real. To them, you and I and everyone else are just things to be used." "That's sad," Jiho said. "It must be lonely to think that way." "You have great wisdom for such a young one," Vex told him. "Yes, it is very lonely. That is why they need weapons like me to feel strong." On the second day, Katal came to visit them. The priest approached slowly, his yellow eyes wide with wonder and fear. "May I speak with you?" he asked, unsure whether he was addressing Jiho or Vex. "Of course," Jiho said brightly. "Vex has been telling me amazing stories about his people. Did you know they could make music with their thoughts?" Katal sat down carefully, keeping his distance from Vex's massive form. "I did not know that. We were told he was simply a predator we had tamed." Vex's mental voice suddenly filled Katal's mind, causing the priest to gasp in shock. "You were told many lies," Vex said, his thoughts flowing into Katal's consciousness. "But you are different from the others. You ask questions. You wonder about truth." Katal's hand shook as he experienced telepathic communication for the first time. "This is impossible. How are you doing this?" "It is as natural to my kind as breathing is to yours," Vex explained. "Young Jiho has reminded me of abilities I had buried under centuries of rage and despair." "What else can you do?" Katal asked, his scientific curiosity overcoming his fear. In response, Vex demonstrated. The crystals along his spine began to glow brighter, and suddenly every piece of metal in the chamber started to float in the air. The priest's ceremonial staff, the guards' weapons visible through the doorway, even the metal threads in their clothing. Everything rose gently into the air and began to dance in slow, graceful patterns. "My people were gardeners of the mind," Vex continued as the metal objects swirled around them. "We helped other species learn to use their psychic gifts responsibly. We believed that true strength came from lifting others up, not pushing them down." The display lasted only a few moments before Vex let everything settle back into place, but the demonstration had shaken Katal to his core. "For 400 years we have used only a tiny fraction of your power," the priest whispered. "Because I allowed you to," Vex replied. "I was broken when you found me. I had lost everything I cared about, and I no longer cared about anything. It was easier to be your weapon than to face my grief. And now, Vex's great head turned toward Jiho, who was practicing moving small pebbles with his mind under the creature's gentle guidance. Now I remember what I was fighting for, Vex said. This child has shown me that there is still innocence in the universe. Still kindness, still hope, and those things are worth protecting. Over the next few days, more Vorthak came to observe the strange pair. Some came out of curiosity, others out of fear. But all of them left changed by what they saw. They watched as Jiho taught Vex human games, showing him how to play with words and ideas just for fun. They saw Vex healing small cuts on Jiho's hands with gentle touches of psychic energy. They witnessed conversations about art and music and the beauty of different worlds. Most importantly, they saw genuine friendship between two beings who should have been natural enemies. Elder Voth was among the visitors. The ancient Vorthak sat in silence for hours, watching Jiho and Vex share stories and laughter. Finally, he spoke. In all my years, I have never seen Vex show any emotion except hunger and rage, he said to Katal. But with this child, he shows joy, peace, contentment. It makes me question everything we have believed, Katal admitted. Good, Elder Voth replied. Questions are the beginning of wisdom. But not everyone was pleased by these developments. Commander Talon grew more angry with each passing day. He saw the bond between Jiho and Vex as a threat to everything the Vorthak had built their society upon. If we cannot control Vex, we lose our advantage over every other species in the galaxy, he argued during emergency council meetings. Our enemies will see this weakness and attack. Perhaps, Elder Voth said thoughtfully, we should consider that there might be strength in something other than fear. Talon's face twisted with rage. You sound like you're infected with the same madness as that human child. Or perhaps, Voth replied quietly, the child is infected with sanity, and we are the ones who have been mad all along. As the week progressed, word of the event spread throughout Vorthak Prime and beyond. Slaves in the work camps whispered about the human boy who had tamed the devourer. Citizens in the Crystal Cities debated what it meant that their most sacred guardian had chosen friendship over duty. And in the ritual chamber, Jiho continued to learn and grow under Vex's patient teaching. The boy's psychic abilities developed rapidly, guided by the wisdom of an ancient teacher who had rediscovered his purpose. What happens next? Jiho asked during one of their lessons. Vex's eyes glowed with determination. Next, little teacher, we remind this galaxy what my people always knew, that the strongest power in the universe is not the ability to destroy, but the choice to create, not the will to dominate, but the courage to connect. How do we do that? Vex's mental voice carried the hint of a smile. We start by freeing everyone who wants to be free, and we show them that there is another way to live. High above them, Commander Talon was making his own plans. If he could not control Vex through loyalty, perhaps he could control him through pain. And if the human child was the source of this rebellion, then the child would have to be removed. But Talon had no idea that his whispered conversations in the council chambers were being heard by a creature whose psychic abilities stretched far beyond anything the Vorthak had ever imagined. The real test was about to begin. 2 weeks after the failed ritual, the first spark of rebellion ignited in the slave quarters of Vorthak Prime. It started with whispered stories that spread from cell to cell, from one work camp to another. The tale of a human child who had tamed the mighty Vex with nothing but kindness gave hope to beings who had forgotten what hope felt like. Daiho was one of the first to hear the story. The captured human resistance fighter had been taken during a raid on the outer colonies 6 months ago. He was strong and smart, which made him valuable to the Vorthak as a worker, but also dangerous to them as a potential leader. Is it true? Asked Mira, a young woman from the mining world of Kepler 438. She kept her voice low as they worked side by side in the crystal processing plant. Is there really a human boy who made friends with the devourer? Daiho glanced around to make sure no guards were listening. I don't know, he whispered back. But I heard it from 3 different people. They say the beast refused to eat the child during the sacrifice ritual. The alien worker next to them, a blue-skinned female named Zira from the Centauri system, leaned closer. My people have legends about creatures like Vex, she said quietly. We call them the first teachers. If the stories are true, they were wise and gentle before the wars made them angry. You think the boy somehow reminded this Vex of what he used to be? Daiho asked. Children see truth that adults forget, Sira replied. Maybe this human child saw past the monster to the teacher underneath. Word of their conversation reached other prisoners through the underground network that existed in every slave camp. By the end of the week, beings from dozens of different worlds were talking about the human boy and his impossible friendship. But it wasn't just talk. Something else was happening across Vorthak Prime. Electronic systems were malfunctioning in strange ways. Security cameras would shut down for no reason. Door locks would open by themselves. Communication networks carried messages that no one had sent. At first, the Vorthak thought these were random technical failures. But the problems were happening too often and in too convenient places. It was as if some invisible force was slowly dismantling their control systems. The truth was exactly that. Deep in the ritual chamber, Vex was using his psychic abilities to reach across the planet. His mind touched every electronic device, every computer system, every piece of technology that kept the slaves imprisoned. Are you doing this? Jiho asked as he watched Vex's crystal spines pulse with gentle light. I am preparing, Vex replied, his mental voice calm and focused. My people believe that freedom must be earned, not given. But first, those who seek freedom must have the tools to claim it. Jiho was learning to use his own growing abilities to help. Under Vex's guidance, the boy's mind had become strong enough to reach the other human prisoners scattered across the planet. He sent them feelings of hope and courage along with simple messages about where to find hidden supplies and safe routes. I can feel them getting braver, Jiho told Vex after one of these sessions. Daiho is planning something big. Yes, Vex agreed. He is a natural leader. His anger burns bright, but it is focused anger. He wants to protect others, not just hurt his enemies. Meanwhile, in the council chambers, Commander Talon was growing desperate. Reports of equipment failures and prisoner unrest came in every hour. He knew that somehow, Vex was behind all of this, but he couldn't prove it. We must act, he told the other commanders during an emergency meeting. Every day we delay, our control weakens. What do you suggest? Asked Commander Korth, a scarred veteran of many raids. Vex has made it clear that anyone who threatens the human child will face his wrath. Then we don't threaten the child directly, Talon said with a cruel smile. We threaten something else he cares about. The plan Talon presented was simple and brutal. They would execute one prisoner every hour until Vex returned to his role as their weapon. They would start with the weakest and work their way up to the strongest, making sure Vex could sense each death through his psychic abilities. He may not care about most of them, Talon explained, but eventually we will kill someone who matters to him. And if that doesn't work, we can always threaten the child's parents. Elder Voth listened to this plan with growing horror. You speak of murder as if it were a simple tool, he said. It is a tool, Talon replied coldly. The most effective tool we have. But Voth was not the only one who heard these words. Katal, who had been questioning everything he believed since meeting Jiho, was also present. And for the first time in his life, he found the courage to speak against his superiors. This is wrong, Katal said, his voice shaking but determined. We have become the very evil our ancestors fought against. Talon's yellow eyes blazed with anger. You dare question the council? I question what we have become, Katal replied, standing straighter. The child showed me memories of Vex's people. They were teachers, healers, protectors of the innocent. We have turned their last survivor into a monster, and now we act like monsters ourselves. Then perhaps you should join the prisoners, Talon snarled. But before he could order Ketal's arrest, alarms began blaring throughout the building. Emergency lights flashed red as automated voices announced system failures across the city. In the ritual chamber, Vex had felt Talon's intention to hurt innocent people. The ancient creature's 3 eyes blazed with righteous fury as he reached out with his mind to every electronic system on the planet. It is time, he told. Iho, I will not allow them to kill others for my sake. What are you going to do? Jiho asked. What my people should have done long ago, Vex replied. I am going to teach. The psychic pulse that erupted from Vex's mind was unlike anything the galaxy had ever experienced. It swept across Vorthak Prime like a gentle wave, touching every living being on the planet, but instead of causing pain or fear, it carried something much more powerful. Understanding. For the first time in their lives, every Vorthak on the planet experienced what it felt like to be on the other side of their cruelty. They felt the terror of the slaves being hunted. They experienced the despair of parents separated from their children. They understood the pain of beings who had been treated like objects instead of people. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. Across the planet, Vorthak guards dropped their weapons as they suddenly understood what they had been doing. Administrators freed prisoners as they realized the horror of the system they had helped maintain. In the slave quarters, Deho felt the wave of psychic energy wash over him. But instead of the crushing understanding that affected the Vorthak, he and the other prisoners felt something different. They felt strength. They felt unity. And most importantly, they felt the mental voice of an ancient teacher offering them guidance. My children, Vex's voice spoke to every enslaved being on the planet. The time of your suffering is ending, but freedom cannot be taken by force alone. It must be built with wisdom and compassion. Rise now, not as conquerors but as liberators. The uprising that followed was unlike any rebellion in galactic history. Instead of violence and revenge, it was marked by organization and purpose. Prisoners who had been enemies worked together. Former guards joined their captives in dismantling the systems that had oppressed them both. Daiho found himself leading a group of mixed species toward the spaceport. Among them were humans, aliens from a dozen different worlds, and even several Vorthak who had been changed by Vex's revelation. The ships are lightly guarded, reported Zira, as they approached the landing fields. Most of the guards have abandoned their posts. Remember what the voice told us, Daiho said to his followers. We're not here to hurt anyone. We're here to go home. In the council chambers, chaos reigned. Half the commanders were on their knees, overwhelmed by the guilt and shame that Vex's psychic touch had awakened in them. The other half, led by Talon, tried desperately to organize a response. All units report to defensive positions, Talon barked into his communicator. But most of his forces no longer answered his calls. Ketal stood in the center of the room, tears streaming down his face as he experienced the full weight of his people's crimes. We have to stop this, he said. We have to help them. Help who? Talon demanded. Everyone, Ketal replied. The prisoners, our own people, everyone we've heard. We have to make it right. Elder Voth, who had felt the psychic revelation but was not crushed by it due to his already questioning nature, nodded slowly. The boy and his teacher have shown us a mirror, he said. We can either shatter it in rage or use it to see ourselves clearly and choose to change. In the ritual chamber, Jiho sat beside Vex as they both reached out with their minds to guide the liberation. The boy had grown so much in these past weeks, his psychic abilities now strong enough to touch minds across the city. I can feel them, Jiho said with wonder. All the people who are finally free. They're scared but happy, like they're waking up from a long nightmare. Freedom is always frightening at first, Vex replied, but it is also the most beautiful gift in the universe. What about the mean ones? The ones who don't want to change? Vex's mental voice was sad but firm. Not everyone can be reached, little teacher. Some hearts are too hardened by hate, but we must try to save those we can and protect the innocent from those we cannot. As dawn broke over Vorthak Prime, the impossible had happened. An empire built on cruelty and domination was crumbling not through violence, but through understanding. And at the center of it all were an 8-year-old human boy and an ancient creature who had remembered what it meant to be a teacher instead of a weapon. But the real test was still to come. Freedom was only the first step. Now they had to prove that a better way was possible. The liberation of Vorthak Prime began at sunrise. As the red sun climbed over the crystal formations, thousands of beings who had been slaves just hours before now walked freely through the streets. The sight was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Jiho rode on Vex's back as they led a massive procession toward the main spaceport. The boy had grown so much during his time on the alien world. His psychic abilities now allowed him to sense the emotions of everyone around them, and what he felt filled his heart with joy. They're not angry anymore, Jiho told Vex as they moved through the city. Even the Vorthak who are helping us. They feel sad about what they did, but they want to make it better. Guilt can be a teacher if we let it, Vex replied, his mental voice warm with pride for his young student. Your people have a saying about this, don't they? Jiho smiled. My mama always said that the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, but the second best time is right now. Behind them, An incredible sight unfolded. Humans walked beside aliens from dozens of different worlds. Former prisoners and former guards worked together to carry supplies and help the injured. Children who had been separated from their families were reunited with tears and laughter. Deho jogged alongside Vex's massive form, leading a group of liberated humans. "The spaceport is still mostly under our control," he reported, "but Commander Talon has gathered some loyal forces near the main command center. They're trying to organize a counterattack." "How many ships do we have?" Jiho asked. "Enough to get everyone home," replied Zira, the blue-skinned alien who had become one of their main organizers. "The Vorthak have hundreds of vessels from all their raids. We can use their own ships to return people to their homeworlds." As they approached the spaceport, Vex suddenly stopped. His three eyes turned toward a large building in the distance where Talon and his remaining followers had barricaded themselves. "He is planning something desperate," Vex told Jiho. "I can sense his thoughts. He would rather destroy the spaceport than let us escape. Can you stop him?" "Yes," Vex said, "but it would require using my abilities in ways that might harm him and his followers. I do not wish to become a weapon again, even against those who deserve it." Jiho thought about this for a moment, then his face lit up with an idea. "What if we don't fight him at all? What if we just talk to him?" "Talk to him?" Deho said in disbelief. "Jiho, that maniac wants to kill us all." "But maybe he's just scared," Jiho replied. "Maybe if we show him that we're not trying to hurt him, he'll stop trying to hurt us." Vex's mental voice carried approval. "You continue to surprise me, little teacher. Very well. We will try your way first." The procession stopped at the edge of the spaceport while Jiho, still riding on Vex's back, approached the command center alone. Word spread quickly through both groups, the liberated prisoners and Talon's forces, that the human child was coming to talk. Commander Talon emerged from the building with a squad of armed soldiers. His yellow eyes burned with hatred and desperation as he stared up at the massive creature and the small boy on its back. "Have you come to gloat, human?" Talon snarled. Jiho slid down from Vex's back and walked forward until he was just a few feet away from the Vorthak commander. He looked very small and fragile compared to the tall, armored alien, but his voice was steady and clear. "I came to say I'm sorry," Jiho said. Talon blinked in surprise. "Sorry for what?" "For making you feel scared and angry. I didn't mean to take away something that was important to you." "You took away everything," Talon growled. "Our power, our control, our way of life. But were those things making you happy?" Jiho asked with genuine curiosity. "When you hurt other people, did it make you feel good inside?" The question caught Talon off guard. He opened his mouth to answer, then stopped. For a moment, his angry expression flickered. "It made me feel strong," he said finally. "But strong isn't the same as happy," Jiho replied. "My papa taught me that real strength is about protecting people, not hurting them. And real happiness comes from making friends, not making enemies." Vex watched this exchange with amazement. Even after everything Talon had done, the boy was still trying to help him understand. It was exactly the kind of compassion that Vex's own people had once shown to younger species. "You don't understand," Talon said, his voice becoming less certain. "Without our empire, without our weapons, we are nothing. We will be conquered by our enemies. Or maybe," Jiho said gently, "you could make friends with them instead. Maybe they're only your enemies because they're scared of you, just like you're scared of them." Behind Talon, his soldiers were listening to every word. Some of them had felt Vex's psychic revelation and were already questioning their old beliefs. Others were beginning to understand what the human child was offering, a different way to live. Elder Voth appeared at Talon's side, having walked from the council chambers to witness this historic moment. "The child speaks wisdom," Voth said quietly. "Perhaps it is time for our people to learn new ways." "Traitor," Talon spat, but the word lacked conviction. "No," Voth replied. "Teacher. Just as this boy has been our teacher, and Vex has remembered how to be a teacher, they are showing us that there is strength in kindness, power in friendship." As if to demonstrate this point, Katal emerged from the crowd of liberated prisoners. The priest had spent the past hours helping to organize medical care for the injured, working side by side with beings he had once considered inferior. "Commander," Katal said, his voice full of newfound purpose, "I have seen what cooperation can accomplish. In one day we have done more good than in centuries of conquest." Talon looked around at his dwindling supporters. then at the thousands of beings who had chosen freedom over fear. Slowly, the fight seemed to drain out of him. "What happens to us now?" he asked, sounding older and more tired than before. "That's up to you," Jiho said. "You could come with us and help people get home. Or you could stay here and try to build something better. But whatever you choose, nobody has to be your enemy anymore." The moment of decision stretched out like a held breath. Then, one by one, Talon's soldiers began laying down their weapons. They walked toward the crowd of liberated beings ready to help instead of harm. Talon was the last to surrender. He stood alone for a long moment, looking at his discarded weapon. Finally, he too walked forward and knelt in front of Jiho. "Teach me," he said simply. The evacuation took 3 days. Ship after ship lifted off from Vorthak Prime, carrying grateful beings back to their homeworlds. Humans returned to Earth and the colonies. Aliens went back to planets across the galaxy. Each ship carried stories of the human boy who had changed everything with simple kindness. Jiho was reunited with his parents on the 2nd day. Hyunwoo and Minji had been rescued from a labor camp and brought to Vorthak Prime to witness their son's incredible achievement. The reunion was full of tears and laughter and tight hugs that seemed to last forever. "I missed you so much," Minji whispered as she held her son close. "I missed you too, Mama. But I learned so many things, and I made a friend who taught me that even the scariest monsters can be good inside." Vex watched this reunion with deep contentment. Seeing the family together again reminded him of his own lost people. But instead of pain, he felt gratitude for the time he had shared with Jiho. "Will you come with us?" Jiho asked Vex on the final day. "You could visit Earth. I bet you'd like it there." Vex's great head lowered so he could look directly into the boy's eyes. "My path lies elsewhere, little teacher. There are other worlds where beings suffer under cruel masters. Other places where someone needs to remember what it means to choose kindness over cruelty. You're going to help them like you helped us?" "Yes, and I will carry your lessons with me wherever I go. You have reminded me that the greatest weapon against darkness is not force but light, not anger but love." Jiho hugged Vex's massive snout, no longer afraid of the crystal teeth or burning eyes. To him, this would always be his friend who had protected him and taught him and shown him that understanding could overcome any fear. "I'll miss you," Jiho said. "And I will miss you," Vex replied. "But remember, the connections we make with those we love can never truly be broken. Whenever you look up at the stars, you will know that somewhere among them, an old teacher is watching over you." The last ship to leave Vorthak Prime carried Jiho and his family. As they jumped into hyperspace, the boy pressed his face to the window and watched the red planet disappear. Somewhere down there, Vex was beginning his new mission. Somewhere out there, former slaves were returning to rebuild their homes. And somewhere in between, the galaxy was learning that there was another way to live. Years later, Captain Jiho commanded the first diplomatic vessel from Earth. His mission was to explore the galaxy and build bridges between species instead of walls. Wherever he went, he found worlds where stories were told of the great creature who appeared to protect the innocent. A guardian who had learned from a human child that true strength came not from the power to destroy, but from the courage to connect. And sometimes, when his ship traveled through the deep space between stars, Jiho would feel a familiar warmth in his chest. He would smile and whisper a greeting in Korean to his old friend, knowing that somewhere among the infinite lights of the galaxy, Vex was still teaching the universe about the power of kindness. The wooden spaceship his father had carved for him sat on the bridge of his vessel, a reminder that when something is made with love and given freely, part of the giver's heart goes with it. And love, Jiho had learned, was the most powerful force in the universe. The story of the human child and the alien teacher became legend, but the lessons they taught lived on. In a galaxy that had known only conquest and fear, they had planted seeds of hope and understanding that would grow for generations to come. And that, perhaps, was the greatest victory of all.